I'm getting a little bit chilling here. Must be all that Frost Mage going around in Dragonflight, because it had received some talent, although the majority of the Frost Mages might still not like the talent tree, and to be fair, there are a couple of things that I'm not personally a fan of. However, it is looking better and better with each chance that devs have to take a look at it, and we can only hope that one day Frost Mage can be as good as Fire, but maybe it's not that bad, actually. Maybe let's take a look and see what Frost Mage is with the most recent changes, and likely, like we say in pretty much every video right now, possibly the last version of Frost that we will have until it goes live, and we can actually play with it in the pre-patch next week. Today, tomorrow, when are you watching this video, I ask you? And if you are watching this video, have you liked it already? You probably haven't subscribed, because we know, we have the data, around 70 to 80% of you are not subscribed, and I don't know why. I mean, hey, maybe you don't want to watch our content, but if you want to watch our content, or you may be just liking the video, and you want to support us a little bit and make the channel grow and make the video do well, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and enable those notifications so that when we do stuff, because we do have some quirky things planned in the near future for you, that you might be interested if you are playing WoW in Dragonflight, then make sure that you have the notifications enabled so that you can get all of our videos, because even though you might be subscribed, and sometimes even if you haven't notifications enabled, you might not get our videos because algorithms. So the more things you have ticked and clicked, the higher the chances are that you will see our stuff. Plus, it does help the channel a lot, and we will love you for it. Thank you. Frost Mage, come on, man. How often are we going to talk about Mage on this channel? Because nobody really plays Mage here. Although Marcelian is sometimes a Mage, and Lego has been known to shoot bolts, I myself like to hit things with an axe. But today, we're gonna shoot Frostbolts. But before we shoot Frostbolts, we have to talk slightly, just a little, about the general class Mage tree. Which, I mean, we covered most of them in the Fire video, but there are some things worth pointing out as well. Shatter has made its way into the spec talent tree, so it's no longer here, which is something that we talked in the last Frost Mage video as well, because the general talent tree for mages was slightly weird when it was released. Overflowing energy came though, and this is one of the newer additions. Your spell's critical strike damage is increased by 10%. When your direct damage spells fail to critically strike, your spell critical strike chance is increased by 2% for up to 10 seconds for 8 seconds as a total buff. And when you crit, you obviously get rid of this buff and you start the cycle all over again, which is something that I mentioned in the Fire video, and it's looking like I mentioned there, it's probably going to be way better for Frost Mage, since your entire kit kind of relies on shattering spells and making them crit. So obviously crit damage is turbo huge for Frost Mage, and I think I kind of like this talent right away. It feels like it's probably going to be mandatory, but to be fair, it's kind of like the only throughput talent on the second row, because you do start with Ice Barrier, and then you go through Overflowing Energy into more throughput nodes, which is maybe not so bad, considering that on the left, on the right-hand side, you have either defensives or utility talents going into more defensives or utility talents. So it's kind of streamlined, which is great, because this is what you want to see. I don't want to be forced to pick utility or survivability just to get to the damage part, whether I want those utility and survivability or not. As for the capstones, you'll still probably want to get shifting power on the left-hand side, which is probably one of the stronger ones. And there's also a choice node with Time Anomaly and Temporal Warp, which Time Anomaly is probably better for dungeons, while Temporal Warp could be better for raids. This is one of the newer capstones that came with the latest changes to the general talent tree for Frost Mages, although they did add this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. What Time Anomaly does is, which makes it so that at any time you have a chance to get either Icy Veins for 8 seconds, Fingers of Frost, or Time Warp for 6 seconds. It kind of rotates on an RNG fashion, so you can get either one of those. Since it's so RNG, you're probably not going to play too much around it, although obviously Icy Veins might have some impact into your rotation based on certain talents that you might end up picking. While Temporal Warp makes it so that while you have Temporal Displacement, which is the Sated debuff, the I just had the Bloodlust, I cannot be Bloodlusted again for 10 minutes debuff, you can actually use your own Time Warp to grant yourself 30% haste for 40 seconds again, which I kind of feel like this is the strongest capstones, but then again, we're still needing some sims, we need some proper tuning as well, although people have been raid testing a lot more. But seeing as it's still beta, it's unlikely that we know 100% that this will be, but it's looking like, if anything, could be 100% true. It's probably Temporal Warp in raids, because damn! While on the right-hand side of the talent tree, you have Meteor going down from Dragon's Breath, which is... this is one of the capsules that I'm not particularly a fan of, because it's obviously a Fire Mage thing, and it doesn't feel like it has any particular amazing impact for Frost, and it doesn't feel like the scaling is worth it. I mean, it does decent-ish amount of damage, so what it does is basically on a 45-second cooldown, you call down a Meteor which lands at the target location after 3 seconds. And it deals 260% of your spell power in fire damage, split evenly between all targets within 8 yards. So the more targets you hit, the less damage each of them take, and burns the ground for fire damage over 8.5 seconds in the area, which is, you know, something that you have to keep things into the ground. This is just pure damage. It has no interactions with the spec. It doesn't enable or disable things. It doesn't prep something to happen later on. It's just raw damage. So that means that if the damage is better than the other talents, then it's probably going to be taken. And while Dragon's Breath has more of a utility take, it could be good. It's also slightly out of the way if you ever want to take Shifting Power, which you're probably likely to want more than Meteor. And they're on opposite sides of the talent tree, so we'll see exactly how they will be picked. Now, the spec talent tree has suffered a good amount of changes, with more pathway enabled, and you managed to find 2 to 3 pretty nice builds. If you do intend to play, if you look into the Mage discords in the communities, the builds have been data mined, and people have been theory crafting and testing, and will likely going. And variety is good, man. It's good that you can play multiple stuff, because this is the cool part about Frost, is that it has a couple of really iconic ability that do different things, and when you can put them into a build, that just makes it more interesting to play. First of all, starting with the left-hand side, Everlasting Frost has made its way all the way up here, and what this does is, as it's a one-pointer, Frozen Orb deals an additional 30% damage, and its duration is increased by 2 seconds, which is pretty good, especially since it is under the Frozen Orb, let's say, part of the talent tree. It's not particularly good. With a new path towards Perpetual Winter, it's a nice change to have it earlier. 2 stacks of Flurry seems to be a must, and it's likely, you know, always going to be a thing, since Flurry is just way better right now in Dragonflight. Looking at how the spec looks and plays, you're likely going to take this regardless. Following down the path on the left-hand side, you have the choice node with Ebon Bolt and Frozen Touch. Now, we haven't played Ebon Bolt, I don't remember, since probably early BFA, maybe? It's been a while since Ebon Bolt has been part of the rotation, while Frozen Touch on the opposite side as a choice node makes Frost Bolt grant you Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze 20% more often. Now, that's a little bit vague, because obviously we don't know 100% the proc chance. I mean, Brain Freeze as a talent, it's slightly higher. And what it does is makes Frost Bolt have a 30% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Flurry and cause your next Flurry to deal 50% increased damage. So is it 20% out of those 30% chance? So that means what? 6% more chance to proc Brain Freeze? Or is it 20% on top of those 30%, meaning 50%? Which is probably not what's going to happen, because that would be like ridiculous. Every second Frostbolt you gave him Brain Freeze, that might be slightly too much. But hey, you have that. And on the left side of this choice node, you have the new Glacial Assault, and it seems a little weaker versus what the tier set gives you right now. So it's a 2-pointer, and makes Flurry have a 30% chance each hit to call down an Ice Comet, crashing into your target and nearby enemies for frost damage for a little bit of AoE, which is, you know, 30% chance. It's kind of nice, it's good, it depends. Now that you have 2 charges of Flurry, might be why this is slightly of a weaker effect than tier sets. Plus, you know, tier sets are always kind of tuned whenever they become baseline into a spec, and more often than not, they're nerfed down. And further down the choice node, you have Deep Shatter, another 2-pointer, and this makes Frostbolt deal 40% additional damage to frozen targets, which is something that's not necessarily too bad, especially if Frostbolts are going to be the spells that you will end up shattering, especially if you don't play stuff like Glacial Spike. This is really good. That means that shattering Frostbolts just deals more damage, which, yay, why wouldn't you want that? And obviously this keeps going down to Cold Front, which is the Capstone, casting 30 Frostbolts or Flurries calls down a Frozen Orb towards your target, and when hitting an enemy player, it counts as double when you gain these stacks, these 30 stacks. So this is kind of, you know, the AoE side of the talent tree. And not to mention that Cold Front also works with the Capstone to the right of it, which is freezing winds, making a frozen orb give you Fingers of Frost every 2 seconds. If I'm not mistaken, this is a legendary that we have right now in Shadowlands. And this is where we hit maybe some of the first issues with the Frost Talent tree, where on the bottom hand side, since they two kind of work together to get freezing winds, you have to path from the middle and not from the left hand side, which is probably designed this way intentionally to offset some balance issues, because if it's too accessible, then you end up skipping a lot of other talents and getting the major strong talents. But it still feels weird. It still feels awkward to say, oh, this works with this other thing, but to get this other thing, you have to go all the way from Icy Veins all the way down into the middle path and maybe get stuff like that, stuff that you don't want, maybe Snap Freeze or things like that, right? But yeah, that's, you know, how looks like the Fire talent tree is also designed, where the middle part where you have the big DPS cooldown buffers is kind of isolated from the side parts of the talent tree. And one other thing, talking about synergies, I'm not sure necessarily if this is a bug or not, but Cold Front still doesn't interact with Freezing Rain properly. Freezing Rain making the Frozen Orb build to be and feel really cool. What Freezing Rain does is makes Frozen Orb make Blizzard instant cast, then increases damage by 60% for 12 seconds. And obviously you can reduce the cooldown of Frozen Orb by having Blizzard cast down on a target, which is really cool, and the synergy kind of works off each other. But if the Frozen Orb that you launch doesn't trigger this, is just a little bit off-putting because it's not particularly obvious. And whenever you have these forced talent interactions, or let's say forced talent, the interactions that don't actually work, it kind of confuses the player, because you think like, oh, so I launch a free Frozen Orb, oh, and I have this other Frozen Orb talent that should make this this other Blizzard spell do really good. But if it's not working together, then that kind of sucks. We don't know if this is intentional or if it's a bug or if it's for balance purposes that it doesn't work this way, but these things need to be worded out and put properly into the tooltip. And on the middle hand side, we have like particularly another issue with the talent tree, because Blizzard is very central there, is right after Ice Lance, and it keeps going down into a bunch of other talents that lead all the way down to your biggest, baddest cooldown, which is Icy Veins, that you cannot skip unless you take Blizzard. You cannot get to Icy Veins unless you take Blizzard, which is... see, you never cast Blizzard in single targets, not with the current numbers or the current design, unless they kind of flip the switch on how Frost is supposed to work, and if they make Blizzard a single target spell, that can be interesting. But since it's never been a single target ability, you have to take it to get to Icy Veins. And not only do you have to take Blizzard, you have to take everything that precedes Blizzard as well to get to Icy Veins. So this is kind of something that I'm not particularly a fan of in the talents, mostly because it just feels forced. It feels like, hey, if you want this, you take this whether you like it or not. And talents are supposed to give you the freedom of choice and freedom of making the builds, with, of course, certain restrictions, because you cannot just have everything that's good and nothing of the average stuff, because then that would be silly. But it's kind of, you know, it is what it is, I suppose. Wintertide has received a new icon, which is on the left-hand side going down from Blizzard. If you look just underneath the choice node, increases frostbolt damage by 7%, 15% if you put a second point in. Fingers of Frost empowered Ice Lances deal 20% increased damage to frozen targets. This is on the left-hand side going down from Cold Snap, which seems to be the single target version of the talents, while on the right side it's the AoE side of the talents that buff Blizzard and Frozen Orb, which is weird because all the Frozen Orb talents are on the left-hand side. This is just unnecessary confusion. Why? Why is this? Why is it the way it is? I'm sure there might be a reason, and if there isn't a reason, then what the fuck? But if there is a reason, it's just slightly confusing for a new player, since I'm not a main mage, and I occasionally play mage a couple of times every patch. I go into the talents like, oh, if I want the AoE side of the talents and I want to do Dungeons and Blasts and Frozen Orbs, I go on the left-hand side. Well, wait, from Cold Snap, do I take the left-hand side or do I take the right-hand side? Left-hand side is supposed to be the AoE, right? Oh, but there's an exception. Here in this particular part of the talent tree, that's not true, but later on it is true, and before it was true, but now it's not true. So it's just, if you're going to create an identity of the talent tree where clearly AoE is on the left in this case and the single target on the right, just keep it consistent so that you don't need to tell players what to pick. But if you're going to like kind of streamline it and tell them like, listen, AoE is on the right and single target is on the left, if you pick these, and you don't know what to do and it all feels too overwhelming, just pick this side and this is AoE damage, or pick this side and this is single target damage, and you'll be fine, right? Because they mentioned that they want stuff to not feel particularly overwhelming. They have done they went to great lengths to streamline a bunch of talent trees to not make it feel weird and convoluted, and to have you do like gazillion maths and sims to figure out exactly what you should get. So this is what we're talking about here. Icy Propulsion was also changed, which is right below Icy Veins. What Icy Propulsion does now, a one-pointer, your damaging single target spell critical hits reduce the cooldown of Icy Veins by 1 second. And it doesn't extend Icy Veins as it used to do, and now you don't have like that permanent Icy Veins, but you do get it quicker, which I guess it's kind of nice. It's basically a gameplay change. Either way, you're gonna have more Icy Vein uptime, whether it's a continuous Icy Vein window or it's more individual Icy Vein windows. That's, you know, it is what it is. It's basically going to impact the gameplay. I'm not sure if I like it or not. It's cool. I think it's fine. So long as it's, you know, balanced properly. I like pressing Icy Veins rather than just having Icy Veins, so I'm that kind of a player. Improved Icy Veins was removed, and in its place came the former capstone of Slick Ice, and on the left hand side you have Freezing Winds as a solo pick, making you able to take up to 4 capstones at the bottom, which is pretty nutty if you ask me. And this is maybe the upside of the way that the middle side of the talent tree is designed, is that if you do go minimalistically from Icy Veins down into the capstones, you can take up to 3 capstones if you so desire. Whether or not you would want to do that, that remains to be seen, because you do have other talents that finalize some of these playstyles that might make them better than actually getting the capstones. But hey, if you like to get the cool toys at the bottom of the talent tree, you can, and there you go. This is maybe a plus to this style of talent design. Now on the right hand side you have Shatter back as a talent, which is right underneath Fingers of Frost. And what it does now, because before it used to be a multi-point investment, now you just multiply the critical strike chance of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5, and you add an additional 50% critical strike chance on top of it, meaning that ideally you would like to have 33% crit chance, 34ish, 33 point something, right? Because if you do have 33 point something, you have 100% crit chance when targets are frozen. It wasn't always necessary, but you can essentially get your crit cap way earlier than other specs, and not to mention with the crit buffers that we talked about in the general talent tree, this can be really cool. This is kind of like a core mechanic of Frost. You'll probably ever not take Shatter, so it's kind of, you know, a mandatory-ish talent. But hey, Arctic Piercing was changed to Piercing Cold, and now only gives flat critical strike to Frostbolt and Glacial Spike. This is slightly lower from Shatter, and it's a 20% critical strike damage, which is, again, I actually kind of like critical strike damage. It's only to Frostbolt and Icicle, but then we did talk on the left-hand side there were some Frostbolt buffers that seem really cool, and probably making it together with this one can make you shoot out some meaty Frostbolts, which is nice, because Frostbolt has been a boring spell for years. Bone Chilling was moved closer to the top, and it's a little bit more accessible. And if you haven't played Frost before, Bone Chilling, whenever you attempt to chill a target, you gain Bone Chilling, increasing spell damage you deal by 0.5% for 8 seconds, and it stacks up to 10 times, meaning that if you can properly maintain this, you have 5% extra damage, which is good, because, you know, it's damage. Who doesn't want damage? Also, since we are kind of on the right-hand side, and I mentioned that the middle side, right at this point where Ice Collar is kind of weird, because what Ice Collar does is each time Blizzard deals damage, the cooldown of Frozen Orb is reduced by 0.5 seconds. This was previously a choice node, now it's, you know, standalone on itself, and like I mentioned, it's just a little bit confusing that it's on the single target side, which is where we are in the talent tree right now, as opposed to the left-hand side where the AoE supposedly is supposed to be. And this was moved here into the tree, and now you can actually take both this and Everlasting Frost, which previously they were the choice node, and that's actually kind of cool because I like frozen node buffers. Flash Freeze is an interesting talent. I don't know if we talked about it last time when we did the Frost Mage, but increase the damage of Icicles, so Glacial Spikes as well. And you get a 5% chance to get more Fingers of Frost, and this can particularly, you know, function really well if you do want those big fat Glacial Spikes, which I personally like. Following down the road, Ice 9 was renamed to Splintering Cold. It's a 2-pointer now. Frostbolt and Flurry have a 15% chance to generate 2 icicles, all the way up to 30% if you put the 2 points in, which is kind of, from its initial inception, it has also been changed in the way that it functions. Although the functionality has slightly been changed, the overall goal of this is just to have more icicles, which obviously is just more damage. You might want your spec to scale towards more mastery, since if the mastery isn't going to be changed, it has always been increasing, you know, it would be affecting your icicles directly, which was always kind of cool, and I think is what this was played. This type of playstyle of just powerful icicles in Icelands was played in Season 2 of Shadowlands in terms of like spec design, not the exact playstyle. And finally we get Glacial Spike, which is hitting pretty hard, which is nice, and it's coming down from Hailstones, which is a 2-pointer investment before it. Casting Ice Lance on frozen targets has a 100% chance to generate an icicle, and seeing as how Ice Lance doesn't consume icicles once you talent into Glacial Spike, this is kind of interesting. You'll get more Glacial Spikes faster, you build towards them faster, and with all the buffers to icicles, this feels like a nice synergy to have, and it will just feel more rewarding pressing each individual spells that go into the rotation of Frost, which is, I think, something that Frost really needed. A little bit more depth to its identity and not be the meme spec of Mage where you just spam Frost bolts a gazillion times and then just launch an icicle or shatter it every now and again when you get a proc. So it's pretty cool. And on top of all of this, we can talk about the tier set now, because we know what it is. It has suffered a little change from its initial release to the 4 set bonus specifically. But first of all, let's talk about the 2 set, which increases the damage of Ice Lance and Frozen Orb. So, you know, once again, it's good because it obviously affects both single target and AoE, and it would have been weird if it only affected like one side, but the tier sets are supposed to be slightly simpler anyway. And the 4 set now, consuming Fingers of Frost, will increase all frost damage dealt by 8% for 6 seconds. And this is kind of cool because it obviously gives you a little window of extra damage dealing. It can slightly alter your rotation, or at least make you aware that as soon as you consume those Fingers of Frost, you will blast for 8% more damage for 6 seconds, which is not a lot of damage, but it is decent. And I'm not sure if this will affect how your combo of shattering spells will work, because you do want this to apply to the biggest damage sources. So we'll see, but it is at least an interesting tweak to the rotation. All in all, Frost doesn't seem particularly bad. It does have some annoying pathing and some annoying talents that you are kind of forced into. However, I feel like it's a massive improvement. Lego has tested it extensively on the beta as well, and he thinks it's looking a lot better. He plays more Mage than I do anyway, but from an average perspective of somebody that plays a lot of specs, going into Frost Mage, it feels good actually, knowing that what it was at the beginning of Alpha, it's come a long way, and it could always use some more work. I would like to see more paths going into the middle capstones, so not feel as restrictive, and I would like to not be forced to take Blizzard if I want to get, and you'll want to get Icy Veins, and if I want to go into Raid, I don't want to be forced to take Blizzard unless they can make me want to press Blizzard in single target, which is a totally different discussion that we can have maybe once we have the Frost Mage guide in Dragonflight. But we will have more videos for you in the following days and weeks as Dragonflight is getting released. So if you like our content and you want to see more of it, make sure that you click all of the little thingies and subscribees and buttonies on our channel. We would be super grateful for it. And thank you, Patreons, for supporting the content. Love you all. You're making this possible. You are amazing. Thank you for watching the video, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.